I stared at the message like it was a joke. We changed all the locks. You have no home. No explanation. No warning. Just digital exile from the people who once called me family. I stood outside the house I used to clean, cook, laugh in, now just walls that rejected me. My husband didn't answer. My mother-in-law blocked me. And just like that, I vanished. Not from Earth, but from their version of reality. 2 years later, she saw me again. But this time, I wasn't begging at her door. I owned the building. I wasn't raised to make scenes. My mother used to say, "Control is a woman's most dangerous grace." So when I married into the Halverson family, old money, tight smiles, and colder hugs, I adjusted. I polished my words. I folded laundry like Margaret did, even though she said I was doing it wrong. I cooked her favorite chicken marsala, despite her allergy lies that kept changing every holiday. I learned that being a good daughter-in-law didn't mean being loved. It meant being tolerated quietly, with a smile so pleasant it disappeared into the wallpaper. Margaret once introduced me at a gala as the one who keeps our son entertained. Laughter followed. I laughed too. But in the car, she patted my shoulder and said, "You wear invisible well, dear. That's why the family likes you." I thought she meant it as a compliment. My husband, Jared, wasn't cruel, just absent, distracted, always looking through me like I was a soft blur in his peripheral vision. He loved his family fiercely, especially his mother. So I played along, nodding, adjusting, erasing. On the surface, we were perfect. I ran the digital strategy for a boutique agency downtown. Jared worked in real estate development, managing buildings his father once owned. We lived in a restored colonial with ivy on the walls and secrets in the basement. Every Sunday was brunch with Margaret. Every birthday was a double-edged invitation. But I never protested. Why ruin something stable? Then came that Tuesday. I had just finished presenting a brand campaign to a client in Atlanta. The flight back was delayed. I ordered soup at the airport and opened my phone to check messages. One notification blinked. It was from Margaret. "We changed all the locks. You have no home." No context, no warmth. Just that sentence, delivered like a final diagnosis. I stared at it, rereading the words as if they might realign into a joke. But they didn't. I called Jared, straight to voicemail. I texted, "Is this real?" No reply. By the time I landed, the key in my hand was nothing more than scrap metal. I tried it anyway. The lock had been changed. The porch light was off. 2 suitcases sat at the foot of the stairs, zipped tight and lonely. Inside one, I found my grandmother's locket. Broken. No note, no face. Just absence. The absence of marriage, of dignity, of narrative. I stayed at a motel that night, the kind where the air conditioner hums like a warning and the sheets smell like detergent and someone else's regret. I stared at the ceiling, thinking maybe this was temporary, a family misunderstanding. Maybe Margaret had a stroke. Maybe Jared would show up in the morning, furious at the overstep. But morning came with no knock, only a new notification. Clara Reynolds abandons marriage for affair in Miami. A tabloid post, Jared's name absent, Margaret's fingerprints all over it. Fake photos, cropped angles, a story I didn't write but now lived in. Comments pouring in, strangers calling me ungrateful, a gold digger, a cheat. Friends went quiet. My boss called, voice tight, asking if I needed time away to handle things. I checked my bank account, frozen, joint account with Jared. He must have pulled rank. I called the bank. They said they needed written authorization from both parties to reinstate access. I laughed. It sounded like someone else's voice. That night, I stood in a pharmacy trying to buy toothpaste. My card declined. I checked my bag for cash. Empty. I walked out with nothing. By week's end, my inbox was a graveyard. Job offers retracted, meetings canceled, my LinkedIn tagged with whispers and vague statements from people I once mentored. I was no longer Clara Reynolds, the rising star in digital branding. I was Clara Halverson, the vanished wife, scandalized and discarded. I went to see a lawyer. He looked at my case like a badly folded napkin. "It's all hearsay unless you have receipts," he said. "Do you have any proof of coercion or financial abuse?" I opened my phone. Messages deleted. Voicemails gone. Jared had wiped our digital history like I was never real. That night, I sat in the bathtub of the motel, fully clothed, letting the water rise. Not to drown, just to feel weightless. Then I remembered something Margaret once told me at brunch, slicing grapefruit with surgical precision. "People like you don't survive alone. That's why we tolerate you." She was wrong, because at that moment I didn't feel erased. I felt rewritten. I didn't scream. I didn't post. I didn't text. I simply vanished. Under the name Emily Rowe, I rented a room above a laundromat on the edge of a forgotten street. The landlord didn't ask questions, just pointed at the broken lock and muttered, "You fix, you stay." I nodded. I fixed it. I stayed. The space had one window, one stove, and a radiator that hissed like it knew things. But it was mine. No locks changed behind my back this time. During the day, I freelanced under aliases, building ad copy, ghostwriting email funnels, optimizing content calendars. My mind worked like a machine, but my heart was ash waiting to catch fire. I studied user behavior by night, scanning patterns in conversation flows, tone shifts, word choices. I wasn't just looking at content anymore. I was looking for control, for manipulation, for silence dressed as kindness. That's when it started. The questions I'd once buried began surfacing with sharp digital teeth. How had I missed the red flags? What did emotional abuse look like in text? Could it be detected before it swallowed someone whole? I bought an old laptop from a pawn shop and loaded it with open-source NLP libraries. I watched YouTube lectures until my eyes blurred. I joined coding forums under a screen name. No selfies, no real name, just a blank avatar and relentless questions. I wasn't building a business. I was building a weapon, one that could decode the language of gaslighting before it ruined someone else, like it ruined me. My first breakthrough came at 2:12 a.m. on a Thursday. I fed the system a string of old messages I'd screen captured before Jared wiped them. The AI flagged specific phrases. "You're remembering it wrong. You're too sensitive. You always twist things." A pattern emerged. Subtle erosion disguised as affection. I named the module Perception Drift. For months, I trained it. I taught it to recognize tone shifts, reply lag time, use of guilt anchors, emotional triangulation. Every phrase Jared and Margaret had once fed me became a data point. I turned their manipulation into code. I called the system Mirror Lens, Mira, from Latin mirari, to wonder or gaze. Lens, for the tool to finally see clearly. At first, it was a simple browser plugin. Paste a conversation into the box. The AI would highlight problematic patterns and explain them in plain language. Not accusations, just clarity. One night, I posted it quietly in a women's tech group under my alias. No pitch, no branding, just something I've been working on. Might help. The post got 5 likes, then 30, then 300, then shares, comments, stories. Wish I had this 2 years ago. My sister needs this. Save me from going back to him. They didn't know my name, but they trusted the tool. By month 6, Mirror Lens had 50,000 users. I refused every interview request. I kept the domain info private. No investors, no face behind the screen, just an email address. mirror.not@mythaprotonmail.com. I reinvested what little freelance money I had into cloud servers and VPNs. I taught myself cybersecurity. I worked 14-hour days and drank black coffee that tasted like Resolve. My skin broke out. My hands cramped. But inside, a flame had begun to build. Steady, invisible, indestructible. There were moments I missed my old life. The smell of Jared's shirts after the dryer. The way the house creaked in winter. Margaret's polished silverware reflecting candlelight. But those were illusions, choreographed kindness wrapped around control. I didn't want warmth. I wanted truth. And now, truth had an interface. The first time Mira Lenz was cited in a legal case, I didn't cry. I just stared at the screen and whispered, "Good." A woman had printed her flagged chat logs to show a pattern of psychological manipulation. Her lawyer used them as corroborating evidence. The judge referenced AI-supported narrative indicators. The abuser walked away furious. She walked away free. I didn't need revenge headlines. I didn't need to crash their parties or scream my story. I was building something louder than any accusation. I was building understanding. And once people understand the shape of a cage, they stop calling it home. Margaret always said I wasn't strong enough to be alone. But she was wrong. I wasn't alone. I was invisible. And invisibility, when chosen, is power. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was constructing the spark that would one day burn the whole damn illusion down. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I disagree. It should be invisible, served in silence, layered in subtlety, swallowed unknowingly by those who once called themselves gods. I never planned to return, but power doesn't beg for invitations. It finds the cracks and slips in like smoke. Margaret had started a new initiative 6 months ago, branding herself as the face of traditional women-led business. A series of PR stunts, workshops, and interviews framed her as the wise matriarch supporting younger female entrepreneurs. It was nauseating. I watched her videos like case studies, clipped tones dressed as nurturing advice, legacy language repackaged for a new audience. She wasn't just surviving, she was rebranding, and it was working. I created a bot named Celine. She was polished, poised, wealthy, and discreet, a fictional investor from Boston with deep pockets and a vague backstory about generational wealth. I trained Celine with voice modeling, real-time language adaptation, and psychological response protocols pulled from thousands of female founder interviews. Celine spoke like trust. She asked all the right questions. She offered all the right compliments. Margaret responded within 24 hours. "I find it refreshing," she said during their first Zoom call, "to connect with someone who understands the importance of preserving tradition while innovating." Selena smiled, pre-programmed, of course, and replied, "Tradition is currency. It just needs the right narrative to scale." By the third call, Margaret was showing her spreadsheets. By the fifth, she offered Celine exclusive insight into the family company's less-than-legal financial maneuvers, tax shelters disguised as charitable funds, asset shifting across multiple shell LLCs, undisclosed family-held stock that floated in false names. I didn't need to coax her. Margaret gave it freely, like a peacock unfurling its tail, believing admiration was safe behind a screen. She never suspected who programmed that screen. Every call was recorded, every email logged. Celine's face never glitched. Her accent never slipped. She was the perfect mask, and behind her code, I sat quietly, watching the woman who once locked me out of her home now unlock herself line by line. The next phase required real-world precision. I'd already built a shell fund, anonymous, silent, backed by real capital, and 2 women I trusted with my life. We didn't want ownership. We wanted majority. We offered Margaret a deal too good to decline, 51% stake purchased at premium value, with her face still at the front for a limited term. "Respect optics," Celine had said. "Let's make this a legacy pivot, not a takeover." Margaret agreed, papers signed, funds wired. Then came the logo redesign. I gave the designer only 2 instructions: include a subtle lens motif and bury the name Mira in the curve of the typography. It had to be unnoticeable at first glance, just a flourish, a trick of light. But once seen, it couldn't be unseen. The day of the rebrand, Margaret stood in front of cameras, announcing the new chapter of the company. She believed she still controlled. I watched the live stream in my apartment, wrapped in a sweater older than the betrayal itself. Then I saw it. On the backdrop behind her, large and proud, the new logo. Inside the second arch, barely visible unless you knew where to look, was the faint imprint of a mirrored iris. She spoke about vision, about trust, about legacy. I whispered, about time. The next week, I walked past the company's flagship office. My heart didn't race. I didn't pause. But in the reflection of the glass, I caught a glimpse of Margaret in the lobby, holding a coffee, speaking sharply into her phone. She looked up suddenly as if sensing something. I kept walking. Later that day, my contact forwarded a message from Margaret to the design agency. Quick question. Was the name Mira intentionally embedded in the logo design? It seems familiar. Familiar. A word that tastes like memory but burns like proof. No one answered her, because the deal was done. The signatures were real. The power had shifted. And this time, I hadn't needed a courtroom or a camera crew. I had used what she once used on me: narrative, illusion, positioning. But unlike Margaret, I didn't crave recognition. I didn't want her to know. I wanted her to feel the silence I once drowned in and realize too late that someone had been watching, waiting, and rewriting her ending. Margaret picked up the call mid-sentence. She was berating her assistant about an investor's delayed wire when the second line beeped in. The number was blocked, but something, a flicker, a twitch, made her answer. "Who is this?" The voice didn't hesitate. It wasn't loud, but it cut clean. "You taught me to disappear. Now watch me dominate." Then, silence. Not a click, not a tone, just breathless static before the line dropped. Margaret stood still, the phone still pressed to her ear like it might speak again. She didn't recognize the voice, but it knew her. It knew everything. That afternoon, the story broke. Major headlines. Halverson Holdings faces ethical misconduct suit. A group of former employees had come forward. Whistleblowers backed by time-stamped emails, flagged tax filings, and recordings from internal calls. The accusations were damning. Manipulation of charitable funds, false labor reporting, coercive employment practices masked as mentorship. Margaret's name was in the third paragraph, tied directly to an initiative she'd publicly claimed full credit for just a year ago. Her press photo, smiling in pearls, shaking hands with a senator, now floated beside the word investigation. She canceled the rest of her meetings. Even the board was quiet. And for the first time in years, Margaret Halverson had no plan, no spin, no script. Meanwhile, across the country, a TEDx stage lit up red. The screen behind the speaker read, "The Language of Control: How Algorithms Can Predict Emotional Abuse." Clara stood behind the podium. No introduction, no backstory, just the data, the voice, the message. "Abuse doesn't always come with bruises," she said. "Sometimes it comes as affection, as tradition, as concern. But if you look closely, if you train the right lens, you'll see the fracture lines before they spread." She never said Margaret's name. She never said Jared. But anyone listening, anyone watching, could feel the ghost of her story stitched into the code. The video would go viral, but Clara left the event before the applause ended. She wasn't chasing fame. She was following a map she had drawn in her own blood. That evening, dressed in jeans and a gray hoodie, she returned to the street she used to call home. The Halverson estate hadn't changed. The same white stone, the same hydrangeas, the same ornate gate that once denied her entry. But she wasn't there for a fight. She didn't even ring the bell. Instead, she placed a tall mirror on the porch. Frameless, clean, surgical. It stood angled just right, facing the front door, so that anyone who stepped outside would see themselves reflected instantly, not from a distance, not through glass, but up close, unfiltered. At its base, she left a letter, handwritten, ink on thick paper, folded neatly and taped to the mirror's stand. She didn't sign it, but the words were hers. "You locked me out, so I built a world without doors." Then she left. The next morning, Margaret opened the front door to fetch the paper and nearly collided with her own face. The mirror stopped her cold. She stepped back, startled. Then forward again, slower this time. She squinted, scanning its edges, trying to understand. And as she stared, the image sharpened. Not her current face, not the practice mask she wore on red carpets or business panels, but something older, harsher. In the tilt of her jaw, she saw the way she used to sneer at Clara's cooking. In the tightness of her eyes, she saw the same look she gave when dismissing Clara's ideas in family meetings. In the stillness of her mouth, she remembered the words she'd spat the night she locked her out. "You were never one of us." She had thought they were just words. She had thought they were necessary. But now, seeing herself this way, without the press, without the lights, she felt something crack. Margaret reached for the letter. Her hands shook. She read it once, then again, then folded it tightly and slipped it into her coat pocket. Inside the house, no one asked what had happened. Jared wasn't home. The staff didn't notice. The mirror remained all day, catching sun and shadow, unmoving. By sunset, Margaret sat in the study, facing the fire, holding a glass of untouched wine. She had built a fortress around her family. She'd made herself the gatekeeper, the judge, the architect of legacy. And yet, she had never thought about the one she pushed out. Not really. Now the house was quiet. But somewhere far beyond it, the world was echoing Clara's name, without even needing to say it. Success, when stretched too tight, loses its shape. That's what I learned in the quiet after the storm. Mirrorlens had become more than a tool. It was a movement. Universities cited it. Legal clinics requested access. Survivors emailed testimonials that bled. But I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel anything. I processed thank yous like data, filtered emotions like noise. I hadn't cried in over a year. Not when the first lawsuit hit Margaret, not when the investor pitch deck I'd once dreamed of passed the $20 million valuation, not even when I walked past Jared in a conference hallway and he didn't recognize me. I smiled when needed. I responded politely. I even gave a keynote in Berlin, auditorium packed, spotlights fierce. And afterward, I couldn't remember a word I said. Everything was coded now. My daily schedule was automated, emails templated, meals delivered. Even my therapist was a bot I'd fine-tuned for optimized empathy. I didn't miss people. I missed friction, feeling, texture. Then the breach happened. Elena, my co-founder, the one person I thought understood the mission, not just the software, but the soul behind it. She had pitched in the early days when it was just the two of us and late-night ramen. She cried the first time Mirrorlens flagged a conversation she hadn't realized was abusive. She called me her sister in every interview, but now her name was on a new patent. An AI model derived from Mirrorlens's core engine, filed solo under a new startup name, and backed by venture capital I never approved. She didn't steal my money. She stole the intent. When I confronted her, she didn't flinch. "You made it cold," she said. "I'm making it marketable." I stood in her office, surrounded by glass and curated inspiration quotes, and I realized she didn't betray me to hurt me. She betrayed me because I had disappeared, even from my own creation. The leak went public in 3 days. Tech blogs dissected the code similarities. Whispers began. Accusations of internal dysfunction, of ideological splits. A journalist published an exposé, Clara Reynolds, the ghost in her own machine. Then the think pieces came. She speaks of empathy, but has never shown her face. Is Clara Reynolds a visionary or just a reclusive control freak? How ethical is AI when the founder disappears from accountability? I didn't respond. Not at first. I watched the backlash unfold like a rerun. But this time, I wasn't the victim. I was the target. Cold, silent, unreachable. They called it mystery at first, then manipulation, then menace. A producer from a major streaming network called, offering a documentary deal. "Let us humanize you," she said. "You're too perfect, too untouchable. People need to see your flaws. I almost laughed, but even that felt foreign. I sat in my apartment for hours that week, staring at a blank wall, not thinking, just observing. My phone vibrated with legal updates. Elena's team offered a settlement. My board demanded a press release, but I didn't move. It wasn't fear, it was exhaustion. The weight of keeping everything upright, curated, protected, of building a fortress so strong not even I could feel through it. Eventually, I walked out, left the laptop open, left the blinds drawn. I didn't pack. I didn't resign. I just exited. I didn't want to defend Miralens anymore. I didn't want to explain the difference between protection and perfection. Let them write what they wanted. Let Elena scale her version. Let the world chew on the shadow I left behind. Because what they were dissecting wasn't me, not anymore. It was a code, a shell, a reaction, and I was done reacting. That night, I stood on a rooftop, barefoot on cold tile, looking over a city that never stopped calculating. And for the first time in a long time, I asked myself, not what I wanted to build, but what I was still willing to feel. I sold Miralens on a Wednesday. No announcement, no press release, no farewell post, dripping with sentiment. Just a signature, a transfer, and the quiet click of a final logout. The board didn't fight it. They were exhausted too, of mystery, of damage control, of waiting for me to explain what I no longer had words for. I walked away with enough to disappear 10 times over, but I didn't vanish this time. Instead, I opened an account under a new name, not for me, for women like me. The Vanished Fund began with no office, no logo, no staff, just a list, handwritten on recycled paper, of places I'd once tried to sleep, shelters that had turned me away, and names of women I'd seen in waiting rooms holding bags that held everything they owned. I hired one woman, a former housing advocate who didn't ask why I wanted everything anonymous. Sometimes all someone needs, I told her, is one act of belief. We designed no website. We answered no calls. We operated in shadows, behind secure channels, encrypted files, hand-delivered letters, and yet the fund grew. Because need has a way of speaking across silence. We gave small grants, tuition checks, rent deposits, escape tickets. No questions, no forms, just referrals from places I trusted. Clinics, halfway houses, underground networks where pain moved faster than bureaucracy. And then, one night, a video went viral. A college admissions officer had filmed it, unknowingly capturing the moment a girl, barely 18, wild hair, trembling hands, opened her acceptance letter on the steps of a shelter. The camera stayed rolling when she found the second envelope inside the mailing packet. It wasn't from the school, it was cream-colored, handwritten. She opened it slowly, lips moving as she read, "From someone who had no home, too. Tuition's covered. Go build your world." The world did what it always does with something pure. It shared, reposted, debated. But no one knew where the money had come from. No logo, no website, just kindness, unsigned and unstoppable. Reporters speculated, activists praised, politicians promised to model it. I stayed silent, not out of secrecy, but peace. I spent my days walking. No more meetings, no more encryption keys, no more boardrooms with breathless men explaining branding strategies to me. I bought a small place near the coast, no gate, no title under my name. The air smelled like nothing I had ever owned. Years passed. The fund became myth. The world kept burning and rebuilding and burning again. Technology changed, names changed, but one thing didn't. Women kept knocking on doors no one answered, and quietly, invisibly, we kept answering. Then, one autumn, a journalist found me. She was young, nervous, persistent. She had tracked patterns in grants, followed whispers from shelters, cross-referenced timelines of Miralens' dissolution and the birth of the fund. She arrived at my doorstep holding nothing but a notebook and a voice that shook when she asked, "Are you her?" I didn't deny it, but I didn't confirm it either. I invited her in for tea. She asked everything. Why I left, what I regretted, if I'd ever missed the spotlight. I told her only this: there's power in building systems that don't require a name to function. I used to want credit. Now I want continuity. She smiled. Do you want to see the article before I publish it? I shook my head. Just spell it right if you use my name. She did. The article came out a month later. A quiet headline buried in a Sunday feature. She never took revenge. She created a world where revenge wasn't needed. The story didn't trend. It didn't make headlines, but it reached exactly who it was meant for, and one of them was Margaret. She was old now, slower. Her business had long been sold off. The family name no longer drew headlines. Jared had moved to Singapore. They rarely spoke. She read the article in the morning light, toast untouched beside her. The words were simple. No accusations, no bitterness, just facts, compassion, consequence. At the end, there was a photo, not of me, but of the girl from the shelter, now graduating, holding her diploma in one hand and a folded letter in the other. Margaret didn't cry right away. She finished the article, then reread it, then looked up at the hallway mirror, still hanging where it always had, above the console she once dusted every morning, and something in the reflection cracked. Not the glass. Her. She saw the face she'd worn when she locked me out. The pride, the cold justification, the unspoken words, "You'll never survive without us," echoing back through time. And now, that reflection was a stranger, because I hadn't come back to beg. I hadn't even come back to win. I had become something else entirely, a mirror she couldn't control. She lowered the magazine to her lap and let the tears fall, not out of guilt, but out of recognition. Some legacies are built in buildings, others in echoes. Mine lived in the ones no one saw coming.